Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video where with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war breaking news update. It's breaking news because it happened overnight and we are seeing Russia's reaction to the call from the European leaders. If you remember, that was Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Donald Tusk and Friedrich Merz from Germany. Their demands for a 30-day ceasefire starting on Monday, the 12th of May, that's tomorrow, with the backing of the United States. So they've been in phone conversation with Donald Trump to get his blessing for that, if you like, and some American, we're quite unsure exactly what, but some American backing to those ceasefire demands and the consequences if Russia does not agree to them. So we were wondering what Russia's response would be. And we had to wait until, I think it was 1:30 Moscow morning time, where Putin came out and gave not so much a press conference as a statement to the press. And he was an hour and a half late. And Putin is used to being late, leaving people waiting as I think a way of exhibiting control. But I don't know if this is because Russia were trying to work out exactly what their response should be, and maybe there were last minute tinkerings. I don't know. But for whatever reason, there was a 1.5 hour delay, and you had the press corps sat there waiting for Putin to come out. Pretty incredible. And when he did come out, well, my opinion is that Putin, from Putin's point of view, not from my pro-Ukrainian point of view, but from Putin's point of view, he played a very clever move here. If you're thinking this is a chess move, this has left people going, okay, interesting move. Not sure what this means for us now. What's our next move here? Type thing. Really, I think it was pretty clever. So what's happened? Well, he came out, made his statement. I mean, initially, before the press conference, Russia was saying they're thinking about a ceasefire, but they're resistant to pressure. That was Dmitry Peskov. And then Peskov told CNN that Russia will consider the 30-day ceasefire, but claims Moscow has its own view on any truce. He also whines about European pressure, adding that new Western sanctions won't scare the Kremlin, which is used to them. Okay, so there was all this kind of talk beforehand. Then Putin came out and made these claims. Right, so first of all, the summary being Putin proposes direct talks with Ukraine. So that was the big announcement, really. And that's what we're going to be focusing on. Putin proposes talks starting on May the 15th in Istanbul. Those are direct talks with Ukraine. Putin says talks to seek a durable peace should take place. And they should deal with the causes of the conflict. That is a vital component of this. European leaders, tell Putin, agree to a Ukraine ceasefire. So why? Okay, let's go and find some of the words here just to get a sense of what Putin was saying. He said that Russia was proposing direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul in an attempt to, quote, eliminate the root causes of the conflict and to achieve the restoration of long-term lasting peace. It was not Russia that broke off negotiations in 2022, it was Kyiv. Nevertheless, we are proposing that Kyiv resume direct negotiations without any preconditions. He said, referring to failed talks shortly after the Russian invasion of 2022. We offer the Kyiv authorities to resume negotiations already on Thursday in Istanbul. If I remember correctly, was it not the Bucha massacre that kind of forced them to go, no, you guys suck? Our proposal, as they say, is on the table. The decision is now up to the Ukrainian authorities and their curators, who are guided, it seems, by their personal political ambitions and not by the interests of their peoples. So, yeah, interesting. Of course, the threat had been massive sanctions on Russia if they didn't agree to a ceasefire. Now, what's interesting here is that Russia have not agreed to a ceasefire. So you think, right, okay, massive sanctions. But this is, my opinion, this is Russia or more precisely, Putin seizing back control. What I was saying yesterday was that this was a really good move by Europe in taking over the reins of these negotiations and taking control of the situation and then dictating things to Putin. We've had too long a time period of Russia and the US dictating to Ukraine, negotiating about Ukraine without Ukraine. And that's been really unseemly. It's about time that Ukraine, with European allies, because this is a European conflict and this is an invasion of Ukraine. So you need Europe and Ukraine involved in these talks. And Europe and Ukraine said to the world yesterday, we are laying down our demands on Russia. And that has got the backing of Donald Trump and the US. That was a really good move, and it forced Russia really into a corner. And Russia have worked out the only way of getting out of this, and they have played that card. And I think this is very clever of them, because people have left thinking, well, do we then hit them with sanctions, go through the whole process of escalating the situation with Russia because they have not technically adhered to what we want? Or do we recognize, which is what Russia want us to recognise, that Russia are serious about peace negotiations, and actually they want to go one step further, if you like, and say we would like direct negotiations with Ukraine. Now, what Ukraine have said previously and are continuing to say today is that you start with a ceasefire and that leads to direct negotiations. Direct negotiations are contingent upon a ceasefire. Russia have cleverly said, oh, you want direct negotiations, do you? Yeah, we'll do direct negotiations. Yeah, forget the ceasefire. We'll just do direct negotiations on May the 15th in Istanbul. But of course, that means the war will continue. Direct negotiations could take, 3 weeks, 3 years. Who knows how long that would take. And of course, in all that time, Russia would still be able to continue prosecuting their war. So Russia then are attempting to reclaim control over the direction of travel here, and are saying, yeah, but we're cool with direct negotiations. If that's what you want, we're cool with that. You'll forget the ceasefire. And then because that's like quite confusing, you're like, oh, you do want what we eventually want, which are direct negotiations, but you don't want the ceasefire. Where does that leave us? Now, for the Europeans and Ukraine, that has actually led to a recognition of the nuanced approach from Russia that isn't quite acceptable. Yaroslav Trofimov here says the message from Putin tonight is that he rejects the 30-day ceasefire proposed by Trump and Europe and accepted by Ukraine, but is willing to have his men meet Ukrainians in Istanbul to negotiate the terms of Kyiv's capitulation. Reading this as a step towards peace is beyond naive. So there's a great deal of cynicism from that. But the idea is that Istanbul is going to be, Turkey is going to be an incredibly important part here. Putin said he was going to talk with Erdogan today now, but he didn't exclude further ceasefires as a result of negotiations. Oh yeah, we might eventually have some ceasefires. Yeah, sure. He repeated that he doesn't want Ukraine to receive weapons and train military personnel during the ceasefire. There's war. We're offering negotiations. What's bad about that? Putin said. So these are conditions. What's bad is he doesn't want peace, says Anton Gerashenko. He wants to weaken Ukraine while continuing to run Russia's military machine. And that's the key point here. Now, the big shame about all of this is that Putin succeeded. What did he succeed in doing? He succeeded in making Trump think this was all wonderful. So Donald Trump has now said, a potentially great day for Russia and Ukraine. Think of the hundreds of thousands of lives that will be saved as this never-ending bloodbath hopefully comes to an end. It will be a whole new and much better world. All caps, weirdly. I will continue to work with both sides to make sure that it happens. The USA wants to focus instead on rebuilding and trade. A big week upcoming. So he just wants to make money out of this and doesn't want there to be fighting. Okay. But Trump has been sold an absolute, he's been unfortunately won over by Putin's rather obvious rhetoric, although it is nuanced and it's clever. But you should be able to see what Putin is doing, and Donald Trump appears to be unable to see that. Interesting, though, that the State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce has kind of got a slightly different view on this.
The Secretary has said that we're going to judge Russia based not on their words but on their actions. We also know we've had this tremendous deal with Ukraine for the reinvestment fund regarding not just critical minerals but other energy sources as well, where it's not about using American taxpayer dollars, but the profits from that deal in part then go into a fund that will help Ukraine rebuild. And why that's important, Laura, is that this is now a partnership between the United States and Ukraine. It is separate from the ceasefire discussions and the war, but this really is about having now America hand in hand with Ukraine, and that is a significant national security boost for that nation. And we also know that they are going to have to rebuild. But in the meantime, we have said repeatedly that in order for us to go forward regarding the conflict, there has to be a ceasefire.
So Tammy Bruce is saying words are not as important as actions, and there has to be a ceasefire. But then really, for her, it's all about the minerals deal. Well, you can say the same for Trump. The question is, does this Russian approach here qualify as not bringing about the sanctions and the ramifications on Russia? And it looks like from Trump's point of view that Putin's been wonderful, but I don't know that everyone else is quite so sold on this. Indeed, we have Emmanuel Macron saying, after Putin's proposal for direct negotiations, he called this not enough. Quote, an unconditional ceasefire is not preceded by negotiations by definition, he said, adding that Putin was, quote, looking for a way out, but he still wants to buy time. So Emmanuel Macron has absolutely nailed it there. It's a way of not answering, of showing that he is committed while also trying to maintain ambiguity in the eyes of the Americans, he said. Macron said that Putin's proposal was unacceptable for the Ukrainians because they cannot accept parallel discussions while they continue to be bombed. And while the Russians sent a load of drones into Ukrainian airspace last night, they were continuing to be bombed. And Macron absolutely nails that. That is spot on analysis and reading of Putin's intentions there. And I don't get how, well, I do get it because I keep talking about how Donald Trump is fundamentally ignorant about everything to do with geopolitics and history and culture and politics and war in this region, and I think just in general. And so he reads things without that context. So you're just reading the words of Putin, and you want to like Putin, and you want to believe Putin. In fact, you were kind of incredulous that Putin could be becoming someone different to who you saw him as, which is a kind of 28 Helsinki Putin. That's, I think, 2018. That's who I think Trump sees Putin as. And then starting to get a sense that Putin's really not trustworthy and dragging his feet was kind of blowing Trump's mind. Then Putin says something like that and you want to believe it, and you want to think the best of what he says. And now he's like, oh, okay, we're back on course. This is great. Whereas everyone else is like, no, do you not understand Putin? Do you not understand how he operates? This is trying to get back control of the situation. And he is playing for time here so that he can continue to destroy Ukraine as much as possible. Zelensky has then come out today and said it is a positive sign that the Russians have finally begun to consider ending the war. The entire world has been waiting for this for a very long time, and the very first step in truly ending any war is a ceasefire. Okay, so Zelensky is quite clever here because he goes, yeah, I recognize what Putin's saying, and good, it's a positive sign. You're finally considering like how to end the war. But we don't do that until we get a ceasefire. And he continues, there is no point in continuing the killing even for a single day. We expect Russia to confirm a ceasefire, full, lasting and reliable, starting tomorrow, May the 12th, and Ukraine is ready to meet. We'll meet you, but there has to be a ceasefire. So Ukraine are holding the line strong there. As Tendar, the German analyst, says, Ukrainian President Zelensky responded to Putin, and it is quite a clever response. He welcomes it, but subtly preconditions of peace negotiations with the ceasefire starting tomorrow. I don't think it's somewhat subtle. Like he does say, yeah, good, but, and then it's like, no, ceasefire. This elegantly shifts back the discussion on this topic and puts the lens on tomorrow. If Russia does not adhere to the ceasefire, then all fault lies squarely on Putin. If Russia agrees to the ceasefire, then it opens the opportunity for the West to move into Ukraine as laid out by me yesterday, says Tendar. So that's moving troops into Ukraine and whatnot. Now, the key to this is going to be Donald Trump and America. Like, if America recognizes the ceasefire plan, as they did yesterday, Trump on the phone call several times to all of those leaders and Macron, I think also separately, Trump on the phone agreed to the European and Ukrainian plan for a 30-day ceasefire or else. And if Trump has now changed his mind on the or else to the point where he's totally happy with what Putin has said, then that will completely undermine the Ukrainian and European position, and will, like I said to you before, it will be like a teacher or a parent telling a child, like, if you do this, then X will happen, and then the child does that, and then you don't follow through on that. You then become completely impotent, and the US could be rendering the Europeans and Ukrainians' statements as or position as kind of weak and meaningless. And that's really, really dangerous. Trump could play directly into the hands of Putin. Tim White says of Zelensky's response that in the words that the dictator will understand, and in Zelensky's first language, spasibo, no niet spasibo. Thanks, but no thanks. Stop the killing, then we talk. So that's the interpretation there. Then we've had another few people say their statements, such as Andrei Yermak, who is the head of the presidential office. So he's basically Zelensky's right-hand man. A lot of people saying he's the most powerful person in the Zelensky government. First, a ceasefire for 30 days, then everything else. Russia should not disguise its desire to continue the war under verbal constructions. The ceasefire is a first step towards ending the war, and will confirm Russia's readiness to end the killings. Then we've got Kovalenko, the head of the countering disinformation department. Putin chose war and refused to end it in favour of a summer offensive. And interesting that he's mentioned that could really be what's going on, that the Russians are gearing up for a summer offensive. Zelensky realizes this, says we need to get a ceasefire in place before they are able to launch a summer offensive, because that could put us under a lot of pressure, and it could help the Russians if negotiations come about after that, because the battlefront is the first stage of any negotiations. It is part of the negotiating process. So if there is momentum behind the Russians and they end up gaining, then that puts the Ukrainians on a back foot if negotiations take place after that. So actually better negotiations take place now, better there's a ceasefire now, and if Russia don't sign up to that, then the Ukrainians just get to hammer the Russians in terms, or allies get to hammer the Russians in terms of sanctions particularly, and maybe some added military aid as well. Putin's statement, says Tendar, completely ignores the ceasefire demand, but throws another breadcrumb so that more hollow headlines are produced. It's a delaying tactic and an attempt to split the West, where the weak-minded in the West would fall for that. I was speaking to the guys behind the scenes, guys I went to Ukraine with, and Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop, I think, pretty much nails it in what he says. I'm not convinced that this is any more than a delaying tactic by Putin. The only difference in his message is a date to sit down. Everything else is the same, including must address root causes. I'm going to speak about that in a second. If Ukraine accepts Zelensky, Zelensky will need to change the law before any negotiations can happen, as The decree is still in force, I believe. I fear Russia will absolutely hammer Ukraine this week to put more pressure on Zelensky, but I do not see this going anywhere as Russia continue to put the cart before the horse. Trump has said Putin's announcement means this could be a potentially great day for Russia and Ukraine. Oh my goodness, once again, not understanding what Putin actually said. So someone else agreeing with me on Trump's lack of understanding. Putin has basically ignored the threats from the European delegates and once again shown that he and only he determines what and when things happen in the war. For that to change, Trump has to move his position and the West have to stand by their threats of arms and massive sanctions. If they don't, any pretense of being able to influence will evaporate. 100%. And if we go back to one of the core demands of the Russians here is that talks will then deal with the root causes of the conflict. Remember, that is a euphemism that he keeps using. The root causes of the conflict are the Ukrainization of the political landscape and the sorry, not Ukrainization, the Ukrainazism. So the idea that the administration are fascist in the old ways of, I've talked about this. I think I did a whole video on the Russian use of the term Nazi, right, and Nazism, and it's basically anything that we don't like, especially as Russia is drifting more and more into being an ultra-nationalist fascist regime. So they are becoming a thing that they have so long railed against. And it goes back to World War II, where they beat the Nazis, so the Nazis were bad guys, and that term signifies everything that Russia is fighting against. But as Russia drifted, particularly in the last 25 years, has drifted closer and closer to the very thing that they were fighting against, that ultra-nationalist fascist ideology, the Nazism as a thing that the Russians are fighting against becomes something else and anything else. And in fact, it's anything that the Russians aren't. And so you end up having this complete switcheroo where Ukrainians, with their desire to become more democratic and to move towards accession to the EU, and with a lower percentage representation of the far right in their politics, in literally elected in the Verkhovna Rada than anywhere else in Europe, they are absolutely not the Ukraine-Nazis that Putin claims. Now, then to say we need to get rid of the root causes, but we need to understand the root causes, as far as he is concerned, is this supposedly Ukraine-Nazi government that is in place. You need to unseat Zelensky. You need to purge the government of Zelensky and all his people. And then you need to demilitarize Ukraine, though that's what he understands as the root causes. And that's a completely unacceptable position. That is a red line that cannot be crossed as far as actually not just Ukraine is concerned. You've heard Donald Trump say that, no, Zelensky can't just be got rid of. And rightly so. So hidden within Putin's change of direction to say that, hey, we're okay with having direct negotiations, are these completely maximalist and ridiculous demands. And that means that even if they are going to go to direct negotiations in Istanbul, there's absolutely no way that they'll be able to achieve any kind of meaningful peace negotiation there with those demands. So, yeah, we'll come and do this, but really it's an empty promise. It's a completely empty promise. So that's really important to remember. So here we have the newspapers reporting this. This is Guardian saying Ukraine is ready to meet Russia, but only if the ceasefire is agreed, says Zelensky. So this is concentrating on Zelensky being strong in response by saying that, hey, we will only meet if there's a ceasefire. And if you don't agree to a ceasefire, then actually we need to follow through on the threats that we issued yesterday. So here we have the live blog. So the whole summary of the live blog, which was going from, last night. Putin calls for direct talks with Ukraine after rejecting a ceasefire ultimatum proposed by European leaders. Zelensky says it's a positive sign Russia is considering ending the war, but there can be no dialogue while civilians are being bombed, said Macron. And Russia launches drone attack on Ukraine despite Putin's calls for talks. And that's pretty much where we're at. So we'll have to wait to see, I think, what the US says. That's the key. And really, it's Trump. What is Trump going to say to Putin? Hopefully with more detail, as in, has what Putin has said allayed Trump's, not fears, but, does that qualify as not leading to the sanctions that were threatened yesterday? That's the real question that needs to be answered now. Now, the final thing I'm going to say before I get on with my hits and losses video, I keep talking about the little things, particularly body language. We've got two or three things to show you with regard to this, the same kind of stuff. Tendar, who's German, says the difference between Chancellor Friedrich Merz and his predecessor, Olaf Scholz, cannot be stronger. He has been in office for merely 4 days, but he already acts like a pro. German responsibility and leadership is back, says Tendar. Now, here is a little snippet, a little window into this.
Sure. Take care, and we keep in touch. Always, if you want to give me a call, and we immediately play. Right? Thank you. See you in London. See you in London. And we train
So the thing to notice there is a Friedrich Merz is in the middle of stuff saying, yeah, I'll see you in London, Keir. See you, Donald. Yeah, and he says to Zelensky, take care and keep in touch. He says, followed up by, always, if you want, you can call. So these guys have these personal lines now. And we know that because actually Macron has a personal line to Zelensky. So Zelensky and Macron, says Max24, this is actually New York Times, are not just allies but close friends. The presidents of Ukraine and France no longer even use official diplomatic channels, but simply call each other on the phone on secure lines, WhatsApp and Signal. Macron regularly receives detailed information from his general staff and intelligence services about the progress of the war, and in conversations with Zelensky, he discusses the situation on the battlefield in detail, right down to the names of frontline towns and villages. In one interview, Zelensky called Macron an expert on war. That's interesting. Now, then get a load of this. So remember, concentrate on the little things. It gives you a window into what's going on. Look at the physicality of this with Zelensky and Macron saying goodbye.
Thank you.
And I think he said you're close to my heart, Macron. Just honestly, like that is an incredibly physically, almost intimate interaction there. Yeah, Macron puts his hand on the back of Zelensky's head. Like that's the sort of thing you do to your family members, to your best of friends, that kind of thing. Macron and Zelensky are very close. That New York Times article is on the money here, and we've got Friedrich Merz becoming part of this as well, and offering Zelensky to call him personally and to take care. There's a camaraderie here that I think reflects so much and is completely missing from the relationship between Trump and Zelensky. These are two different political worlds, and Trump is just simply not part of it. The question is, can Zelensky get Trump world to back up these guys' plan for massive sanctions on Russia? And we just have to wait and see. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.